Midnight Horror Stories. The Last Train. Driven Line 7 for 11 years. The Central Subway. 12 stations end to end. 22 minutes door to door on a good run. You learn the tunnel the way you learn a face. Every bend, every vibration in the rail, every pocket of dead air where the pressure changes and your ears pop for no reason you can explain. I knew that line better than I knew my own flat. Then came the Thursday I picked up a late shift, covering for a driver who had called in sick. That was my first mistake. His name was Gorecki. He never called in sick. Not once in 9 years. I didn't think about that until much later. The depot supervisor handed me the manifest and said nothing unusual. Last service of the night. Doors close at Aldenmore Terminal at 0:47. Standard run, 6 cars. I signed for it and climbed up to the cab. Through the windscreen, the tunnel looked exactly the way it always looked. A black throat waiting. I released the brake and moved off. The first 3 stations were empty. That is normal after midnight. Platform staff reduced to 1, cleaners finishing their rounds. The city draining itself through these underground corridors until nothing was left but echo. Between Croft Square and Dunmore Road, the tunnel does something odd. It curves north for about 40 meters, then corrects back south. Drivers call it the shoulder. On that curve, your instruments flicker, always have. Engineering never fixed it. I passed through the shoulder without thinking. But this time the flicker lasted longer. And when the instruments steadied, the journey time counter had reset to 0. I ran the diagnostic. Everything came back green. No fault. Speed normal. Track clear. But outside the cab window, Dunmore Road Station never appeared. The tunnel just kept going. I called the control room. 3 attempts. No response. Not static. Not a dropped signal. The line stayed open. Just breathing. Someone breathing quietly on the other end. Then a station appeared ahead. But I didn't recognize it. The platform was old. Older than anything on Line 7. Curved white tiles, the kind they stopped using in the 60s. Some cracked, some missing entirely, showing raw brick beneath. The signage boards were dark. No station name, no line markers. Just the shape of a platform and the smell of standing water. I brought the train in slowly. Something in me did not want to stop. But the brakes responded on their own. The train halted perfectly at the platform edge. Like it knew the stop. Like it had made it before. The doors opened without my input. I waited for the doors to close. They did not. Through the rear monitor, I watched the carriage interiors. Empty. I had checked before departure. No passengers. But now the third carriage showed a figure, seated near the center doors. Still, facing forward. I zoomed the monitor. The figure wore a driver's uniform. My uniform. Same jacket, same company badge strip on the sleeve. But the face was wrong. turned slightly too far in one direction, like a photograph of a face rather than an actual one. I sat for a long time without moving. The figure on the monitor did not move either. Then the platform tannoy crackled. Not the train speakers, the platform speakers, which had no power source I could account for. A man's voice, flat, careful, like someone reading from a list. Next service, line 7, towards Aldenmore Terminal, driver Marsh T. Departed, never. My name is Thomas Marsh. I have not missed a departure in 11 years. I left the cab. Protocol says you never leave the cab. Protocol assumes your instruments work. Protocol assumes you know where you are. The train was cold, colder than the tunnel. My breath fogged between the seats. In the third carriage, the figure was gone. The seat was empty, no warmth in the fabric. But beside it, on the floor, sat a driver's bag, exactly like mine. I unzipped it. Inside, a manifest for tonight's service, my signature at the bottom. But the departure date read 1987. I heard someone board from the platform. Unhurried footsteps. The sound of a person who had been waiting a long time and was no longer surprised by anything. She sat in the far end of the carriage, older, a gray uniform I did not recognize, some earlier version of the company colors. She looked at me the way people look at someone standing in a doorway they know will not hold them. "You are the driver," she said. It was not a question. "I was," I said. She nodded slowly. That is how it starts. She told me she drove line 7 before I did, before my predecessor, before records that still existed. The tunnel between Croft Square and Dunmore Road had always been wrong, she said. Engineers called it subsidence, old trackbed shifting, a convenient explanation. "What is it really?" I asked. She looked at the window. Our reflections looked back. Mine moved when I moved. Hers did not move at all. "A fold," she said quietly. The tunnel folds back on itself at the shoulder, has done since the war. Something happened down here during the bombing. Something got caught in the fold. It watches the drivers. It has always watched the drivers. She explained it carefully, like she had been rehearsing the words for years and was finally grateful for an audience. The fold did not take everyone. Most drivers passed through the shoulder 1,000 times and felt nothing worse than a headache and a flicker on the instruments. But occasionally, it noticed someone. She did not know why it chose one driver over another. Maybe patience, she said. Maybe it recognizes something it wants to learn. I thought about Gorecki. 9 years without a sick day, 9 years of perfect runs. I asked her what had happened to the last driver. She was quiet for a moment. "He is still here," she said. "He drives the train you cannot see from the cab." I returned to the cab. The instruments had reset again. Journey counter at 0. Speed 0. But the track ahead was moving, or the train was. It was impossible to tell. The platform was gone. The tunnel stretched ahead as it always did, except wider now. The walls further apart. Service lights spaced at intervals I had never measured in 11 years of the same run. My hands were on the controls. I had not put them there. I tried to brake. The lever moved easily, but the train did not slow. I cut the power. The lights inside the cab died. The train did not slow. I reached for the emergency stop. My hand would not close on it. Not paralyzed, not restrained. Just not interested. Like the part of me that wanted to stop had become briefly irrelevant. I heard the woman's voice from the carriage behind. "Do not fight the controls," she called through the door. "You will only confuse it. It needs to believe it is still the driver." The train stopped, not at a platform, in the open tunnel with no explanation. The instruments died entirely. Emergency lighting came on, that orange glow that makes every face look wrong. I heard the front doors open, not the passenger doors. The cab door. But I was still inside the cab. Both facts true at once. Something stepping out of a cab that still contained me. I went to the end of the carriage and looked out through the door window. It stood on the tunnel maintenance walkway. My shape, my height, my jacket. But it moved like something practicing the idea of a person, rather than being one. Too smooth between steps, no natural hesitation. It walked to the tunnel wall and placed a hand flat against the brickwork. Leaned in. Listening. The wall pulsed faintly, or the light made it look that way. The woman appeared beside me. "It is mapping," she said. "Every driver it notices, it studies, it listens to them work, the decisions they make, the hesitations. It wants to understand how a person occupies a role so thoroughly that the role forgets it is wearing them." Outside, the duplicate turned from the wall and looked back toward the train. For a moment, I thought it was looking at both of us. Then I realized. It was only looking at me. It could not see her at all. She had a logbook, water damaged, cover soft with age. She held it out without ceremony. I opened it. Names. Dates going back decades, each entry the same format, driver name, date of incident, and beside each entry, a status. The status column used 2 words only. Returned, or remains. I found Gurecki 3 lines from the bottom. His status read, remains. Below him, in fresh ink, my own name. No status yet. I asked her what the difference was between returned and remains. She looked at the logbook with the careful expression of someone describing a road they had taken only once. The ones who returned understood what it was studying, she said. They gave it something to learn that satisfied it, enough that it let them carry the memory back up. The ones who remain, it was not finished with them, or they could not separate themselves from what it had already begun to copy. I thought about my hands on the controls, not placed there by me, already learning the gesture, already beginning to own it. How do I give it something? I asked. She shook her head. You do not perform for it. It knows performance. That is the first thing it learned. You have to show it something it genuinely has not seen, something it cannot copy because it does not understand the source. Outside, the duplicate had returned to the walkway and was pacing. Not impatiently, methodically. No signal. I drove into Harlan County on a Tuesday in late October, which is the wrong time of year to drive into Harlan County, if you intend to come back out. I didn't know that then. I was a journalist. I knew how to ask questions, and I knew how to write the answers down, and I believed, the way journalists believe things early in their careers, that those two skills were enough to keep a person safe anywhere. The assignment was simple on paper. 14 hikers had gone missing in a 40-mile stretch of the Appalachian Trail over the course of 3 years. Not unusual in itself, the mountains take people every season, weather and falls and the particular arrogance of people who underestimate distance. But these 14 had something in common that the Park Service wasn't advertising. They had all filed the same trail report on the same app before they disappeared. Same route, same waypoint checked, same final note logged at a place the maps called Cutter's Ridge. None of them had ever reached the next waypoint. I had arranged to meet a local named Burl Estes, who had lived in the area for 60 years, and who had agreed, for reasons he did not explain, to take me up to the ridge. He was waiting outside a gas station in a truck so old it looked like it had grown there. He did not offer his hand when I introduced myself. He looked at my recorder and my notebook and my clean boots and said nothing for a long moment. "You are not the first one to come asking," he said finally. "You probably won't be the last." I asked him what that meant. He just started walking toward the tree line. The trail up to Cutter's Ridge takes about 2 hours at a normal pace. We did it in closer to 3 because Burl stopped frequently. Not to rest, to listen. He would hold up one hand without turning around and go perfectly still, and I would stop behind him and hear nothing but wind through the canopy and the distant drip of water off the rocks. And then after a moment he would move again, without explanation. I stopped asking what he was listening for after the 3rd time. The answer was always the same. "Nothing," he said. "That is the point. Nothing is what you listen for." He meant the birds. I realized that slowly. The higher we climbed, the quieter the forest became. Not peaceful quiet. Wrong quiet. The kind of silence that sits in a room after something has happened in it. Cutter's Ridge itself was unremarkable. A long, flat spine of exposed rock about a 1/4 mile above the tree line, with views west into a valley I couldn't find on any of my maps. There was a cairn at the eastern end, stones stacked by hikers over years. And beside it, scratched into the surface of the largest flat rock, were words. Not carved carefully. Scratched fast, the way you scratch something when you do not have much time. I crouched and read them. Do not follow the path west. Do not follow the path west. Do not follow the path west. The same sentence, repeated until the scratching became ragged and then stopped entirely. I stood and looked west. There was a path. Narrow, descending into the valley I couldn't find on the map. It looked well used. More used than the main trail, if anything, the grass worn flat on either side, the soil packed hard and dark. "Don't," said Burl. He was not looking at the path. He was looking at me. I asked him where it led. He said he didn't know and had never known anyone who came back able to say. I asked him about the 14 hikers. He nodded slowly. And the ones before them, he said. Before they started keeping records. I asked how far back he meant. He looked out at the valley for a long time. As far back as there have been people in these mountains, he said. Which is a long way back. We made camp at the ridge that night. My idea. Burl had not brought a sleeping bag, which I found strange. He sat with his back against the cairn and watched the valley while I set up my tent, and tried and failed to get a signal on my phone. I had 12% battery and no bars, and a recorder with 4 hours of ambient nothing on it, and nothing that would make a story anyone would print. I told Burl I needed something concrete. A name, a theory, a source I could quote. He was quiet for so long I thought he had fallen asleep. Then he said, "The ones who go down that path, they do not get lost. They do not fall. They find something. And what they find sends them back. But it takes a while to notice that the thing that came back is not quite the same as the thing that went down." I wrote that down. I asked him how you could tell the difference. He turned and looked at me directly for the first time since we had set out that morning. The firelight was behind him, and his face was in shadow, and his eyes caught the light in a way I did not entirely like. "Little things," he said. "They get the voice right. They get the face right. They get the memories right, mostly. But they don't get the small things right. The way a person holds a pen. The way they laugh before the joke lands, a habit their friends know. Small things. Enough, if you are paying attention." I slept badly. When I woke before dawn, the fire was out, and Burl was gone. His truck was still at the gas station. I had driven us up, and there was no sign he had gone back down the trail. I called his name. The forest gave me nothing back. I packed up and started down alone. I told myself he had gone ahead. I told myself there was a sensible explanation. I was a journalist. Sensible explanations were my profession. It took me 2.5 hours to reach the trailhead, and another 40 minutes to drive back to the nearest town with a signal. I sat in a diner and charged my phone and wrote up my notes and ordered coffee I did not taste. The waitress asked if I was the reporter who had gone up to the ridge with Burl Estes. I said yes. She set the coffee pot down carefully. Burl Estes died in 2019, she said. Heart attack. Up on that ridge, actually. They found him beside the cairn. I sat with that for a long time. I went back through everything. The voice, the face, the answers that were just specific enough to seem real, without ever quite confirming anything. The way he had looked at the valley and not at the path. The way he had sat all night without a sleeping bag and not once complained of the cold. The small things. I opened my recorder. 4 hours of wind and ambient forest sounds. And then, at the 2-hour mark, a voice. Not Burl's voice. Something approximating Burl's voice. The way a recording approximates a room, the shape of it right, the texture wrong. Saying things I had no memory of him saying. Coordinates. A name I did not recognize. And at the end, almost too quiet to make out. You took the wrong notes. You were looking at me when you should have been looking at yourself. I have listened to that recording many times since. I have shown it to people. They hear what I hear. They agree the voice is wrong in ways they cannot name precisely. They agree it is unsettling. They write it off one by one as a trick of the wind, or a glitch in the file, or the kind of thing tired people hear when they are alone in the dark on a mountainside. None of them have asked me the question I have been waiting for someone to ask. The question I would have asked before. The question any good journalist would ask immediately upon hearing a story like this one. They have not asked me to prove that I am the one who came back down. I have been sitting with that gap for 8 months now. Sitting with it the way you sit with something you already know the answer to, but are not ready yet to say out loud. I hold my pen differently now. I have noticed that. I laugh a half-second late. I have noticed that too. Small things. The kind of things a person would only notice if someone had told them what to look for. The story ran in March. It won a regional award. My editor called it my best work. She said it felt unusually intimate. Like I had really gotten under the skin of the place. I thanked her. I used my voice and my face and the memories I have, which are correct, mostly. I filed my next assignment. I drove to the next town and checked into the next motel and sat on the next bed and opened my notebook to a clean page. And I have been trying. for 8 months. To remember how I used to hold a pen. The Ridge Station. Everyone in Kettle Fork knows you don't go up to the Ridge Station after dark. We don't talk about why. You grow up here long enough, you stop needing reasons for things. The mountain gives you its rules and you follow them the way you follow the weather, not because you understand it, but because you have seen what happens to the people who don't. The station was a fire lookout once, back when the Forestry Service still manned them. They shut it down in 1973, after the last warden, a man named Cecil Prater, stopped responding to radio check-ins. They found the station empty. No sign of Cecil, no sign of struggle. His supper was still on the table, half-eaten, fork set down like a man who intended to come back to it. They searched the mountain for 3 weeks and found nothing. After that, the Forestry Service locked the station and walked away from it, and nobody official has been up there since. That is the story as the county tells it. The story as Kettle Fork tells it is longer and considerably worse. My name is Ida Mars. I am 53 years old, and I have lived on this mountain my entire life. My grandmother knew Cecil Prater. She said he was a quiet man, careful, the kind of person who checked his equipment twice and never took risks he didn't have to take. She said the week before he disappeared, he had started locking his radio away at night. She said he told her once, when she brought supplies up the trail, that something had started coming to the station after dark. That it came to the window. That it had learned to stand just far enough back that he couldn't see it clearly, but close enough that he could hear it breathing. She asked him what it looked like. He said he didn't know. He said every time he brought a light to the window, it was already gone. But he said, and this is the part my grandmother never forgot, the part she told me twice, slowly, making sure I had it right. He said that whatever it was, it had started to learn his name. That it said it quietly, from just beyond the tree line, in a voice that sounded almost right. I tell you all of this so you understand that I did not go up to the Ridge Station out of ignorance. I went up because my son Danny went up first and did not come back down. Danny was 22. He was not from here in the way I am from here. He was born on this mountain, but he had his father's restlessness, his father's appetite for the thing he'd been told to leave alone. He had been talking about the station for months, said it was just an old building, said the stories were old women keeping children in line. I told him what my grandmother told me. He nodded the way young men nod when they are waiting for you to finish, so they can do what they already decided. He went up on a Friday in November, texted me from the trailhead at 4 p.m, said he'd be back before dark. By 9, I was in my truck. The trail up to the ridge is 40 minutes in good light. I've walked it 100 times collecting herbs and checking the creek lines after heavy rain. I know every root and every stone. But that night the trail felt different in a way I cannot fully describe, longer than it should have been, the trees pressing closer, the beam of my flashlight seeming to stop just short of where it usually reached, like the dark was thicker than normal up there. I heard the station before I saw it. Not sounds from inside. Sounds from the tree line beside it. A low, rhythmic sound, almost like breathing, almost like something that had heard breathing once and was doing its best to reproduce it. The station itself was a 2-room wooden structure on a raised platform with a glass-sided observation cab on top that the warden would have used to scan for smoke. The lock on the door had been forced, recently, the wood around the hasp still pale and raw. I went inside. Danny's pack was on the floor, his phone was on the table, screen cracked, the battery was dead. On the wall beside the window, someone had written in what I first took to be marker, and then understood was not marker. A single sentence written at chest height in letters that got smaller and more ragged toward the end, as though the writer's hand had been losing strength. It already knows your name. I stood very still. Outside, the breathing sound had stopped. The silence that replaced it was the kind of silence that has weight to it, that presses against the walls of a building and makes the wood settle and creak. Then, from somewhere above me, from the observation cab, I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate, crossing the floor of the cab from one side to the other, then back. The footsteps of someone pacing, the footsteps of someone who had been waiting. I should have run. I have asked myself 1,000 times since why I did not run. The only answer I have is that they were Danny's footsteps. The exact weight and rhythm of them. The slight drag on the left side where he had broken his ankle at 14 and it never healed quite straight. I would know that walk anywhere. I have known it since he took his first steps on the kitchen floor of the house where I was born. I climbed the ladder to the observation cab. He was standing at the far window with his back to me, looking out over the dark valley. He was wearing the same jacket he had left in. His shoulders were the right width, his hair was the right length. When I said his name, he turned around slowly, the way you turn when you have been expecting someone. His face was Danny's face. Almost. The proportions were correct, the features were correct. But the expression was wrong in a way that hit me somewhere below thought, somewhere the body understands things before the mind catches up. It was the expression of something that had assembled a face from memory and had done an impressive job of it, and knew it had done an impressive job, and was waiting to see if that would be enough. It said my name, in Danny's voice. Perfectly. And then it smiled. And the smile was where it lost me, because it was a smile that went on a fraction too long, and involved muscles that a human smile does not use. And I understood then what Cecil Prater had understood, alone up here 50 years ago, with his supper going cold on the table. I went back down the ladder. I do not remember crossing the floor of the station. I do not remember the trail. I remember the trailhead in my truck and my hands on the steering wheel and the way the heater sounded. And nothing in between. I called the sheriff. I told him Danny was missing and that I had been up to the Ridge station and that something was inside it. He sent 2 deputies up the next morning. They found the station empty. Danny's pack was gone. The writing on the wall was gone. They found no sign that anyone had been there at all, and they looked at me with the careful, patient expressions of men who have decided a woman is hysterical and are being kind about it. That was 4 months ago. 3 weeks after Danny disappeared, My neighbor Carol Fitch told me she had seen him. In town, at the gas station on Route 9. Said he looked well, said he waved at her. Said the only strange thing was that he was parked on the wrong side of the pump, and when she mentioned it, he laughed and said he didn't know what had gotten into him. Other people have seen him since, at the diner, on the trail below the ridge. At the edge of my property, twice, standing at the tree line in the early morning, looking at the house. My neighbor's dog won't go near the yard anymore. My chickens stopped laying in January, and I found 3 of them dead in the coop, with no mark on them, no sign of predator. Just dead. Last week, something knocked on my door at 2 in the morning. I didn't answer it. I sat in the dark in the kitchen with my grandmother's old shotgun across my knees, and I listened to it knock. Patient and unhurried, the way you knock when you know the person inside can hear you, and you are in no particular rush. After a while, it stopped. I heard footsteps going back across the porch. And then, from the tree line, in Danny's voice, perfectly, warmly, the way he used to call when he came home from somewhere. Mama, I'm home. Why won't you let me in? I have not slept properly since November. I have started leaving the lights on. I have started checking the locks twice, 3 times, the way Cecil Prater must have checked his, toward the end, when he understood what was coming to his window at night, and understood that locks would not be enough. My grandmother used to say that the mountain keeps what it takes. She said it like a warning. I understand now. She meant it as a fact. The mountain keeps what it takes, and sometimes it sends something back in its place, wearing the right shape, speaking in the right voice. And it is patient in the way that old things are patient, the way the mountain itself is patient, because it has been doing this long before we put a name to this place, and it will be doing it long after we are gone. I do not know what is living in my son's face. I do not know where my son is. I know that whatever walks out of those trees and stands at my window and says "Mama" in his voice is not him. And I know that it is getting better at it. And I know that one of these nights I'm going to be tired enough, or desperate enough, that the knowing will not be enough to keep me from opening the door. The mountain keeps what it takes. I think it is almost ready to collect the rest.